Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. It's an absolute privilege to MC this webinar on behalf of QPC, and it's in collaboration with one of our long-standing trusted partners, Customer Science Group. So it's again a real privilege to do this with them. I'll run through some housekeeping shortly, but just a heads up, we're going to send through 3 poll questions throughout the session. So keep your eyes open for those and feel free to respond to those. I think the first one might come up very shortly. Okay, just a couple of housekeeping items. If everyone's happy to please stay on mute for the duration of the session. We welcome any and all questions via the chat function, and we've put some time aside in the agenda towards the end of the session to go through some Q&A, and we'll get through as many of those questions as we can. Anything we can't do, we'll take offline and come back to you individually. If there's a question that's specific to someone in the session, please just feel free to put their name in that question as well. We'll send the recording of the session out to everyone, and we'll let you know via email after the webinar once it's ready for you. Okay, the topic for today is future-proofing your customer service strategy, and we have some absolute experts in the field with us who are going to be talking through various components of that today. So first up, we've got Mr. Andrew Carlton, who's the Principal Consultant at Customer Science Group. He's going to be walking us through a proven framework which is used to sort of craft your customer experience strategy. And with Andrew, we have Stephanie Holt, who's a QPC Solutions Consultant, an absolute technology whiz, and she's going to be joining Andrew through components of that discussion. Last but not least, we have Michael Sutherland, who's our Group Operations Manager at JCar Electronics Group. Now, Michael's known to drive change through organizations with a focus on the right people, process, and technology. So it's really glad he's joining us today. And he's going to give us his perspective from a customer side on how they've enabled some of this strategy in collaboration with Customer Science. Also myself, Steve French, Account Exec at QPC, I'll be your MC for today. So thanks again for joining. I might hand over to Andrew now.
Excellent, thanks for the intro. Just popping up a few slides on screen for us today, and welcome everyone. I think first place to start is that I'm a bit of a geek. I like a good framework. I like a really good Excel spreadsheet as well, for those that are aligned with that. And today we're just going to go through a maturity matrix, which really provides us an intuitive structure to think about how far along are our organizations in their customer experience journey. How do we benchmark? What does good start to look like? And probably most importantly, I think the third outcome is how to prioritize your customer experience activities. For those that may not know, CX is abbreviation for customer experience, and if I use that, I apologize in advance, but it's littered throughout the slides today. So couple of qualifiers. This is definitely not rocket science, to be honest. If you have an opportunity within your organizations to sit back and work with some committed and compassionate people on customer experience, you'd probably be able to develop something. And equally, it's not a score. We're not here to score or rate. We're here to provide some reflection and some ideas. Having said that, we have leveraged this maturity matrix across about 100 organizations and workshop with about 50 organizations through all levels of an organization. So it's embedded in some reality. So maybe first of all, our poll, Vanessa, we asked a question: how many people are aware of the maturity matrix? And if anyone could answer that, would help us as we go along. Vanessa, do we have any results on that?
Yeah, they're coming through right now. So
Okay,
thank you,
great.
everyone. We've got most people, I think, responding.
Excellent.
And
So as we're gathering that, this is a pretty basic or common maturity matrix. It's a simple 5 by 5. Along the top, you'll see 5 levels of maturity, and down the left-hand side, 5 levels of capabilities. And about 70% of the participants are familiar with a maturity matrix. So I'll run through reasonably quickly. If you look at along the top, those levels of maturity, the maturity matrix has been around probably since the 70s, but we like to look at basic through to leading. At that sort of lowest level on basic, some of the models talk to ad hoc or absent or initial or immature. We prefer the term basic because we like to think everybody's on a journey and trying to make progress. And at that top end, it's often referred to optimized, but to that extent, we don't like optimized either in the customer experience space because you never quite get there. So we use basic through to leading. And then on the left-hand side, there are those 5 components or categories. And we'll go through those in a little bit more detail, but I'd like to present that behind each of those capabilities on the left-hand side are sub-matrices. There's more detail behind those, and what we're really focusing in on today is a summary. So we'll go through each of those just quickly and build this out. I assure you we'll move very quickly through if you're already starting to glaze over. But firstly, on the alignment, it really focuses on even the presence and the effectiveness of a customer experience strategy. Is it even there? How are investments made? What's the level of culture and the strength of governance and measures across the organisation? So typically at a basic level, we'd find almost some platitudes. Yes, the customer experience is recognised. It might be part of values or part of a statement, but as you dig a little bit deeper, then there's really not a strong customer experience culture, and there seems to be very little governance or control. As you sort of shift through to the right in foundational, you start to see some evidence of vision and branding. There might be some CX metrics that are pretty basic. And as you move further to the right, you start to see a stronger CX culture developing across the organisation. There might be some senior roles that have customer experience measures in place, but getting up to competitive, you really start to see the level of focus within an organisation shift more to the top of the organisation, with customer experience officers or chief customer officers being more present. You also see customer experience being quantified as a return on investment. It's not nice to have, it's fundamental to the business. And you start to see some real-time metrics in place. And as you shift further to the right at leading, you start to see across the organisation that the business strategy actually is customer experience. It's not we do this and we're customer focused. That is actually the business strategy. Probably the best example I have of this would be American Express. In my mind, 60,000 employees drink the Kool-Aid every morning around the world. The decision making, first and foremost, is about what's the impact on the customer, and then secondarily, what does that mean in terms of the finances and other things. More locally, though, elements within Service New South Wales, I think, is a pretty good example. It's probably not leading, but it's certainly getting up there, where the whole organisation is focused, even at a government level or at a government level, to really drive customer experience, and the organisation is set up that way. So I'll just move on to capabilities, and in the same way, capabilities are largely around the people, the structure, the roles, and the performance measures that are in place. And at a basic level, you typically see traditional selection and onboarding of people. There's probably an absence of measures for customer experience at a role level. As you shift towards more to the right, moving into foundational, you start to see some KPIs in place. usually at an organisation or an executive level. You might start to see some CX requirements in some roles, but that's usually at the front line, your contact centres and more customer-facing roles where customer experience is in the role descriptions. And you'd typically not see a lot of voice of employee programs in place. As you shift further along to the right, you start to see some broad-based employee collaboration to solve customer issues, not this traditional siloed of, oh, I've put that through to some other area. There's this ownership in each of the departments within the organisation for solving for the customer. And as you move up to leading, you start to have some serious reward systems in place that are based upon customer experience. Some examples from some really good examples, you may not know them, in some smaller telcos like Aussie Broadband and Mate. They're very, very serious about how they hire, who they hire, how they train, who they promote. It's almost entirely based on customer experience capabilities. Globally, probably the best case study here would be Zappo online shoes. If you haven't seen that, it's a brilliant case study, but they've really bought into their capabilities at an individual level, driving customer experience. The next capability is processes, which is largely around, and I think this is a significant component, but it's largely around process design, continuous improvement, change management. The tools are there to support, such as knowledge management and vendor management, as an example. And at a very basic level, there's very little in place, actually, and we see this quite typically. We go and try and find either a process design or a customer journey map, and it's just not there. There's very little reporting and probably no knowledge management across the organisation to be able to share and understand, some pretty basic information. As you move up towards competitive, you start to see a little bit of a shift towards some, end-to-end understanding of the customer experience. You start to see some support being in place, some tools that are in place. At a competitive level, you start to see customer data is driving the decision making and the design. Vendors, they don't even use the term vendors, they talk more about partners that are bought into the proposition of the organisation and sharing of those outcomes. And at leading, you're really starting to see customer-centred design and digital first. Amazon is probably the standout here, I think, where they've really got that end-to-end understanding happening. Their digital presence is strong. Might not appreciate everything they do, but in terms of the deliveries and the product range and pricing, they've kind of got, in our eyes, from a process perspective, they've got a full package. Locally, again, you might not like it, but the banks do very, very well in this space. And frankly, some of the supermarkets, what we're seeing, particularly with their online shopping and home delivery space, they're really getting their act together around those processes, particularly in terms of the ordering is very slick, the delivery time's been notified, and if you've ever tried to get a reimbursement, then that process has really been nailed down. Next one, talking to the voice of customer, and that's largely around having customer data and then using those insights and those analytics to actually drive customer outcomes. And at a basic level, there's very little in place. There may be some surveys, but shifting along, you might start to see some infrequent surveys or some periodic surveys. Complaints might be part of a database. As you further shift along, you start to get some more sophisticated measures in place, touch points and those experiences understood. And as you get to leading, measures sort of shift from surveying. And I think the days of surveying are probably on the decline, moving to real-time analytics, understanding through customer behaviour, but also having things like voice biometrics and sentiment analysis in place. Probably Optus and Telstra would be a standout in this space. You may be amazed how much they actually know of your experiences. And I think the issue here of, when we talk about some of these examples of organisations and voice of customer is, do they have the tools and the processes in place to be able to listen and understand? And how well do they leverage that in terms of the customer experience is one of execution, not necessarily capability. And then lastly, in the tech and data space, which is, again, probably absolutely fundamental, is the systems and platforms, the data management, the digital capabilities. And at a basic level, there's legacy systems that are in place, very little digital appetite or understanding of how that might form part of the customer journey. Excuse me, as you shift to the right, you start to see some CRMs or basic CRMs or ticketing capabilities in place. Progressing further to the right, you start to see whilst some of the systems might be siloed, they would start to be integrated, may be able to get a single customer view. And when you get up to leading, you start to see that information to enhance the experience. And I think, really having the technology and data in place and then being able again to leverage that to actually improve the experience is the key. There are some local standouts. I think some examples there would be Sydney Water, NRMA Roadside Assistance. They both leverage their data and really are starting to make the process seamless. Sydney Water, for example, have monitors and cameras in sewer lines that actually monitor what might be going on under the ground and provides alerts to local households where there might be particular problems, rather than seeing sewerage come up through your pipes and then ringing Sydney Water. They've reversed that. The onus is on them to recognise. And NRMA is able, you're enabled to initially contact NRMA. You could do it online, you could do it via the phone, but that then quickly diverts to real time on their app, being able to get notifications and details of the drivers and leveraging GPS. That whole process is really through the use and leveraging of some smart data. So that's a whip through. I said I'd move quick. A whip through the various components, and then that sort of brings us home as a full map. I think if I put this up at the start, you probably would have switched off. But as a full summary, then what we do is a bit of a self-assessment, and where do we honestly feel that we sit in each of those categories. The example I've just got up here is on their alignment being foundational, and maybe some advancements in the technologies, but really the capabilities, the processes, and those customer insights are still at a pretty basic level. And overall, placing the organisation, maybe nudging foundational in that regard. So that would lead us to our next poll question, which is which of the 5 elements or components down that left-hand side, do you feel either holding you back, or forget the actual question, Vanessa, I'm sorry, but if you could pop it up. So yeah, of the 5 components, not the 6, which are your biggest challenges? And you can tick more than one if you like. So as you're doing that, we'll just move on to the next element. And I'd like to introduce you to Michael Sutherland. Michael is one of our clients at JCar. We've been working with them for about a year. For those that, and I'll let Michael do a much better explanation than I can, but yeah, JCar is a fantastic electronics group, operate within the wholesale and retail world. Fantastic store designs, one of Michael's accountabilities, as well as the customer service centre, and building out their online presence as well in both the retail and wholesale space. So Michael, I might hand over to you to do a bit of an intro, and I'll ask some questions as we go along.
Great, thanks for that, Andrew. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me in here for a chat. Yeah, so Andrew touched on JCar. We've been around a while as a group, around over 40 years now. And what we do really well is bricks and mortar retail. That's what we've always done. And one of the things that we've identified coming out of COVID was that our online space and our call center, our customer service team there, it was definitely a weakness in the business. Definitely something that we really wanted to improve on. we saw the advancements that were being made by some of our competitors and some other retailers in the field over COVID, and their ability to adapt and our inability to kind of match that pace, which is where Andrew and the customer science team came in. So in May in 2021, we engaged with customer science, which is around about the time that I took over the customer service teams. So there were 3 distinct teams for our 2 retail businesses and wholesale business. They're now under the one umbrella, under the operations team now as a group function. So we did that review in May, and one of the things that came out of it was that maturity matrix that Andrew has shown you there, which was a high level overview of the business, kind of not a scorecard, but a kind of a reality check on a sheet, which really helped us to leverage making changes going forward. So as you can see there, it's not flattering, but it wasn't a surprise to us. So, the reason we engaged with them in the first place is because we knew that this was a weakness. But what it really helped us to do was to kind of, in a single page, I guess, show the relevant stakeholders where we were sitting, and help us to leverage that to make changes in the business, which is what we're undertaking at the moment.
So, Michael, we might pop up the next poll question, which is, maybe people can play along at home as well, to think about where they may be placed as an organisation on their own maturity matrix. And so, Michael, in terms of just some of these, you said that it was, a bit of a reality check. Is there any one particular component that really stood out, or is this, if you'd thought about it, probably about right?
Look, I don't think there are any surprises there. We knew, I guess, how weak we were in some of these areas. I guess maybe the most surprising one to come out of it was processes. Just kind of uncovering the processes that we had in place. These call center began as literally a mail order center where you'd tear your page out of the catalog and circle the things that you want with your check and send it in. That's how that team was established. And a lot of these processes haven't evolved very far from that, which I think was a bit of a shock, especially to some of the key stakeholders, being the senior leadership and the board that weren't really into the nitty gritty of these centers, and them seeing on a page, just how far we'd slipped from the mark, I think is pretty powerful, pretty humbling, and I think it's really allowed us to drive the changes that we're driving at the moment, and we'll continue to drive to get up towards that, the right hand side of the page there, which is where we're aiming at.
Yeah, and I think, Michael, I probably should have mentioned, the aim actually isn't to be leading in everything, right? That's not really the objective here, but by the look of the poll, looks like you're in good company with about 70% of the participants saying they're probably at about the same level, maybe a bit more. So that's good. I think probably the key is, we mentioned this isn't a score, right? So what was the value? What happened from here? Bit of an awakening, bit of a poke in the ribs, but what was the value really of doing something like this?
Look, besides the reality check, being able to benchmark ourselves and being able to articulate that benchmarking to the board was really powerful. Having an independent, review come in and, articulate where we were and where we need to be, I think is very powerful. It's a very powerful tool for us to then, build upon where we were. It's very hard to articulate without a review like this, just how, just what you need to change and why you need to change. So having this, independent, not a scorecard, but independent benchmarking was very powerful for us, and it was very effective as well in allowing us to make the changes, or to begin to make the changes. And now that we have this in place, we now have a dedicated strategy in place, and we're aligned as a business. We're all on the same page, We're making changes in not just our processes, but at the moment, rescoping our tech. We've aligned our business strategy, or embedded our customer service strategy now in our business strategy, which wasn't the case before. As you know, Andrew, we've now written what I'm calling the customer manifesto, which is our customer service strategy going forward. Look, I don't think that we could have gotten to that stage as quickly as we have without this.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think we often see that if degree of difficulty in terms of some of these components. I think the first and the last components, the alignment and the tech, seem to be the ones that have a greater challenge to get going. Some of the capabilities, processes, and voice of customer are a little bit more in control and being able to move along, but you don't have that organizational alignment and that commitment and desire and everyone lined up. It's a hard slog. And then the tech very quickly becomes the hurdle or the barrier from moving much further. So yeah, I think the way you guys have approached it has been bang on, and some of those processes and capabilities should be able to move on pretty quickly. So I think for the group, I think if we did JCAR again today, even 12, 18 months on, Michael, it'd be slightly different, but certainly not leading, but a shift to the right. And I think that's the positive, right? That you can actually see the movement and work on the priorities.
That's it. Once you have that alignment as well, from the top down, it makes it really easy to drive those, the rest of the points there. So that we're not where we want to be, but we're definitely in the process of shifting to the right in all 5 of those categories.
Excellent, Michael. We're going to I'm going to maybe check with Steph, in terms of that tech, anything to add, and I'll stop sharing screen and hand over to you, and we'll come back after you to take some more broader questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I'm going to talk a bit about the tech side of things, guys. Specifically, and I'll just chuck a slide up for a second, but specifically tech's more my space than anything else. So the touchy-feely side of stuff is kind of important, but from what I do is generally about finding the technology solutions that basically, ultimately help customers progress on these journeys. And as Andrew highlighted, technology is often a really difficult point. It's often a challenge for organisations because there's often gaps in those areas. Now, I'm going to focus on 5 areas, and when I say focus, some of these are just discussion points just to plant a seed, but there are obviously more ways that technology can be used to enable and assist your customers on that journey. But the 5 that I'm going to look at today are the channels that you receive your customers communicate to you through, customer data, feedback, analytics, and then quality management. So just having a look at that, right? We're going to have a look at your channels, right? So for a lot of customers, their channels involve something like this, right? And then basically you start, and not everyone will handle all these channels, to be fair. And a lot of the times a lot of the time, the channels that you operate in are dictated by your customers or by strategic objectives of the organisation. So, for example, if your competitors have chat, well, then you probably want to have chat. And if your customers say to you, hey, we use WhatsApp, then you want to be able to have WhatsApp. And then ultimately, we start looking at this from a channel perspective, and then you start piling in interactions, which is more of a generic term. We used to call them calls back in a traditional day, but they're not calls anymore. They're customer contacts, so they're those interaction components. And then things start to get a lot messier when you start getting to this point, right? And then ultimately, the goal is to take something like this and find a way to funnel it into something. Now, I've called it an intelligent routing platform here. Now, you know, ultimately, and we are a Genesys vendor, right? So what this means for us is we plug all this into Genesys, right? Now, but that just because, you know, and I will talk Genesys speak, but ultimately that intelligent routing platform, you know, used to be what we call a call center piece of software, or if you go back even further, you know, it might have been your phone lines and your mail room, right? But now it's evolved to the ability to take all these different interaction types. And we find customers that are, you know, they have several goals generally when it comes to receiving these interactions. And that is, you know, A, I've got to get them in, and then B, I've got to get them to the staff who have the skills to allow them to facilitate handling these pieces, right? And that's where this intelligent routing or some kind of platform, yes, we sell Genesys, but I mean, it doesn't need to be a Genesys platform. It can be, you know, sometimes your mail room will sort things out, or sometimes, you know, they'll do different things with the website. But ultimately, one of the things we talk to customers about often is trying to get all these interactions to come into the one place. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One, it allows you to distribute that workload relatively easily compared to, you know, more traditional senses. But it also allows you to measure exactly where your customers are coming from, what interactions you're having, how long it's taking you to handle those interactions, and how much time you spend on that. Now, I want to, that's probably the only real Genesys reference here for those of you that don't have Genesys. But I mean, ultimately, from moving on to customer data, then it's like, how do we curate that information and store that information in a way that allows us to determine what our customers are doing and how we can assist our customers? And that ultimately comes back to taking that intelligent routing platform and some kind of customer storage system, whether that's a CMS, a CRM, you know, they've a ticketing system, a billing platform. I mean, ultimately, organizations are very complicated these days. And it comes down to, you know, taking those interactions and finding a way to store those interactions in some type of customer management system, right? Now, it might surprise a lot of people to know that there isn't a one size fits all for this, right? So, you know, the number of people that we have that will reach out to us and say, oh, I've heard that, you know, the best solution is for me to get a Dynamics and get Genesys and have it all tied in this one pane of glass. And yes, that is a, you know, a gold standard of a solution, but is that the right solution for you? And is that the right solution for your organization? And ultimately, you know, generally you don't get the opportunity to stop your business just to allow you to restructure your organizational technology components, which means that, you know, even if you come up with some amazing design about how you want it all to sit together, the progress or the journey to getting to that is often cumbersome and requires a lot of work. So I just want to go through a couple of ways that we've worked with customers in the past to allow them to integrate that customer data storage system in their routing system, okay? And one of those ways, one common way is basically to get your real-time and your non-real-time interactions. Now, I separate those two out there because, you know, real-time is your SMS, your voice conversations, your outbound components for customers on your website, and that connects through to you. But from the other side of it too, you've also have those non-real-time interactions, which is, you know, they uphold the back end of your business, right? So your emails, the forms your customers fill in, the letter mail, if you're still receiving. I still have fax there in the, fax is the technology that just doesn't die. It comes up all the time as a common requirement, and a lot of government bodies still prefer to use fax, especially for medical information. But basically just running through this, we funnel all this into some kind of routing system, and the job of the routing system is to find the most suitable agent with the right skills to handle the customer query at the right time and in the right order, right? So it's important to have that in there. And then we talk about, you know, basically, you know, do we, you know, when an interaction comes into this system, do we reach out? We've got a few of our customers who do this, where we reach out to this customer storage system to say, how do you want me to handle this? Does the customer have an open case at the moment? And if they have an open case, should I send it to the person who's managing that case? Or do they have a primary account manager? Or are they a gold class customer? Or do they get a different priority? Or, you know, are they on a stop hold from an account perspective? We can get all that intelligent information before we even direct this item here from a routing point of view. We can also make sure that when it does get to an agent, we show the right interaction, and then we basically, at the end of it, we add a record to that interaction. So something along the lines of this. So I've just jumped into our Salesforce solution, but if you actually have a look here from a Salesforce perspective, right, ultimately you've got the Genesys piece in here, you've got a customer record up, and the solution is automatically creating activity tracking for each time a customer contacts you. So when your staff member gets that type of interaction, doesn't matter what type of interaction it is, they can see here that, oh yeah, this person here's contacted us on this day and this day and this day and this day. And it lets you start understanding that customer journey, how many contacts they're having with you, and then ultimately turning that into understanding that experience. And Andrew talked before about the fact that, you know, he said surveys are on their way out. Well, it's because we're finding other ways to get that customer information. Another way that we've got customers that do this is they basically split real-time and non-real-time interactions. Non-real-time interactions they send off to their customer data store. Real-time interactions they send into the intelligent routing. But because these two talk, basically the customer data store gets it and might say, can I process this by myself? And if it can't process it, then it goes over to your routing platform to say, give me an agent with these skills. I need this priority. I need this sit there. So that basically from a management perspective, you can see how much of this work is stacking and racking on that front. Okay. I will move a little faster because I want to make sure we've got time for questions and answers, but then you get into feedback. And the number of times I talk to customers about feedback and they say, oh, you know, we want some feedback surveys. You say, okay, well, is that post-interaction survey? And for your post-interaction, is it organizational metric that you're after? You know, would you recommend the organization, or is it specific to the agent's interaction? Is it going to be an agent metric? And then you've got post-issue resolution, which is, you know, if a customer's called me to complain that, you know, we didn't do something and I tell them we'll endeavour to fix it, there's probably not a lot of point me surveying them at that point to say, hey, you know, how well do you think we did? You know, if I didn't fix your issue, well, you know, then that basically is not going to come back positively. And then the other part of feedback is, you know, taking the customer data and trying to understand your customer journey before they even reached out to you. Is there a way that you could basically help them in the first place? And that's basically where analytics comes in. And that's why I've got these questions in here. You know, how do we do? How can we do better? What journey did the customer go through before they contacted us, after they contacted us, after we assisted them, the next time that they wanted to buy something, talk to us, purchase something, did we improve? And there's that constant, it's one of the great things of having a maturity matrix is looking at that and basically saying, yeah, okay, well, yeah, we acknowledge maybe we're not great right at the moment, but you know, how do we make this better, and how do we focus on it so that we get to the next parts? And then from a quality management perspective, you know, one thing we talk to customers about is they say, oh, yeah, we've got quality management, you know, it's an Excel spreadsheet, it's a tool, and we do X, Y, Z. But looking at that from that perspective, there are pieces of kit out there that allow you to you know, turn your, you know, calls into a transcript and then analyze the transcript. There's tech out there that we work with, and I'll just, my next slide is just to give you an idea of who we work with and the things that we can interconnect with. But, you know, I talked here about your quality management. You know, we've got solutions that can handle quality management from multiple different vendors. You've got your call journeys, you've got Calabrio, you've got Verint. They all have the ability to take in calls and do automatic quality management. I'm not trying to take away your supervisors. So it's important that they augment that journey and provide the feedback. But you know, wouldn't it be great if you could have every call in your platform monitored, and then the data from that mind, and then you could understand those customer journeys. And ultimately, that's the technology's there now, but it comes back down to how do we get to, where do we sit with that? And the other thing to keep in mind is, of course, the technology scape changes, your business needs change, your customer needs change. So, there's no easy solutions to this.
That's fantastic. Thanks,
Back
Steph.
to you, Steve.
No, that's perfect. I think that's a really good segue, actually, to a very good question from Dre, popped in the chat. And I really like this question because it sort of highlights two different experiences from a customer perspective based on where the company is in the maturity model. So Andre is asking, how does the repeat customer experience influence an overall customer experience? Do they have to start the journey new each time they interact with the company? And I think both Andrew and Steph have sort of showed in their own ways how that's not necessary a lot of the time for a customer to newly interact with the company. But I'll hand over to the group to.
I'll even go a step further, Steve. Customers these days are frustrated if you don't know what's happened beforehand, right?
Yeah,
they don't care that you're Bob and they talked to Mary last time. The organisations we work with are telling us that the customer just does not care. Sorry, Andrew.
No, I was just going to say they expect it, and it's a great question, Dre, because I think it pulls in together the technology and the processes and the people, right? It brings that all together, and the capability for a repeat contact, let's call it a call in this instance, being able to be routed based upon an expected query. We might know that statements were sent 2 days ago, and a lot of people call when their statements arrive, and if that call came through, then the agent can be presented based upon the phone number, even who that customer is, can present on screen their recent history and their recent contacts, can even call up even provide who they last spoke to, what the issue was it resolved, could actually also show what was their sentiment through a survey that they completed after that last transaction. It can tell you how long they've been with the organisation. And it can even prompt the agent to say, this person doesn't have, an online account. If that's appropriate, then be offering that or offering an upgrade to a product. I think it's a fantastic question. And the landscape here is changing dramatically. I think it's largely off the back of technology and having that customer data. But the challenge for most organizations is then using it sensibly and effectively. But customers definitely have that expectation that I've been with you 20 years. I expect you to know more about me than me telling you from scratch who I am. Great question, Joe.
Well said. Yeah. Look, thank you, everyone. We're at time now, so I think we'll wrap this up. If there are any other questions, please feel free to send them through to Steph, Andrew, or myself, and we'll be more than happy to answer them. I'd like to thank Michael, Andrew, and Steph for today and sharing with us your experience. And please, if there's any feedback, follow-up questions or comments, please feel free to just reach out, and we're more than happy to chat about it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot.